All right, we are live on the Andre Duke Show with Carter Smith. We got a very special guest coming in today, Kirk Barton from Buckeye Scoop. He is the producer, host, and guy making it happen over there. So, Kirk, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Really excited to be here and to be with you guys. Appreciate you guys having me as always.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you coming on. Love talking to you. So glad we could work out a time and get everybody together and chop it up.
Yeah. So, Kirk, we'll dive into the NFL side of it. Everybody, obviously on Buckeye Scoop, here's a lot of the stories from your college days. What was it like whenever you showed up to Tallis Hall for the first time to check it out, like be in the NFL?
It's intimidating. I mean, I think most rookies, their first day is rookie minicamp, and rookie minicamp is weird because it's there's usually like 10 to 15 guys that got drafted in the NFL draft by that team. Then there's 10 or 15 undrafted free agents that they sign, and then there's like 40 guys that are just completely unsigned tryout guys that do not have contracts, guys that if they don't have a big weekend at rookie minicamp, their career's literally over. Like, I mean, potentially. And that's like something that, so when we went out to practice the first day with the Bears, like there were 70 guys on the field and it was none of the regular Chicago Bears. Like it wasn't Urlacher or Olin Kreutz or Lancers. Like we didn't see any of those guys while we were there the first time. So it's an interesting experience because like, you don't know what to expect, but when you've got 40 guys out there on the field that literally don't have contracts and they're doing anything they can to do anything. I mean, it can get pretty wild during practice, but most of the practices are not scrimmage. It's a lot of one-on-one stuff and individuals and stuff because they don't allow contact. You're not in pads. You're just in helmets. So it's but when people are 40 guys don't have a contracts in their dreams of to play in the league, and the dream could literally die within 72 hours. Like they're gonna do everything they can. I mean, they're gonna play like they have pads on just to try to. I mean, it's wild, but like I said, it was fun. There's the intimidation. There's the whole fact of like you're in the league now, so it's a whole different ball of wax because the talent is different, and plus you can get cut at any minute. So it's a whole different feeling than like being at a place like Ohio State or just playing college football.
Yeah, I would imagine. You were obviously drafted, right? I think it was round 7, pick 247, right? So I know a lot of people talk about being a late round draft pick like that. Some people believe that it's better if you go undrafted at that point. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think would you have rather gone undrafted and been able to pick your situation, or?
No, I mean literally everybody wants to be drafted, and I know that there's people that because at the end of every NFL draft, there's always the analysts or the experts that have never like played football, or they've never been like a kid sitting there trying to get drafted. There's never been a human in the universe that said, "Man, I wish I would have gone undrafted instead of getting drafted." Because
Right.
it's the draft is. It's a miserable process, especially if you slide. And there's a lot of kids. There's always kids on Ohio State every year that they slide out, like Seal Chambers, who got cut the other day. Is with New England now after a couple of months with Detroit. Mayan Williams went to the combine. Didn't get drafted. Like it's always better to get drafted. So as much as people want to say, oh, it'd be more beneficial to pick your situation, I'm like, look, if a team picks you, it's because they think that you have some chance to make your roster. Now, you might be a pure camp body if you make it that way, but there's seventh rounders that make it. And the NFL is composed of like 35 or 40% undrafted guys. So, but everyone wants to be drafted. Everybody wants to get that call. And again, it's a long 3-day process, man. And I remember I was hanging out till almost the end of the draft, and it was brutal. I hurt my knee at the Senior Bowl. I couldn't work out at the combine, and so I slid like a rock from. I had people tell me, probably 4th or 5th round, and I slid down to the 7th because my knee. I failed my physical at the combine, so it was that ain't good. Like because you go through the NFL combine and people they analyze every aspect of your health. And if you have a bad knee, which I had a knee that needed microfracture, I found out. I didn't find this out until I got to Chicago, and I went and saw Freddie Fu in Pittsburgh, who's like the second best knee guy in the world, and he literally said, you need microfracture on your knee. And I was like, that ain't good. I was like, well, I get microfracture. I'm going to take some Tylenol and let's ride and put a knee sleeve on. And because, when you're finally getting paid to play football, like you're not getting microfractures. Like I'll get when I'm done with my career, but you get microfracture at the beginning of your career, then I mean, it's over before it even starts.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's an interesting gig, but I loved the NFL. I thought the NFL was great. I watch it every Sunday. I'm a big fan of it. So, yeah, but my ride in there was wild, and but it was good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, but you kind of mentioned it. I thought I remembered that you were projected to be like 4th or 5th round, and then obviously injuries, things like that slid. Mm-hmm. Going through your career, you obviously played for a handful of teams, and were on rosters for 2 or 3 years. What would you say was your favorite organization you were a part of?
Honestly, Detroit. The Detroit Lions were a great organization. So I bounced around for people that aren't familiar with my path. It was Chicago, San Francisco, Miami, Denver, Detroit. I mean Cincinnati. I mean, I was all over the place. It was crazy. But I honestly, like, San Francisco's a great organization too. I mean, they're owned by the York family, which is a young sound-based family. So, I mean, you can tell a lot about an organization by how their facility looks and how their food. There's like little things. I mean, I'm not being a baby, but if owners invest money into a facility and they've got good food and all the little things, like, then you're gonna be in great shape. Like the 49ers, like, I mean, it was such a great place, great people. But I really like Detroit. For the totality of it, I didn't like living in San Francisco. Now, when you play for the 49ers, you live in Santa Clara, which is where the new stadium is. But with Detroit, it was just like being in Ohio, kind of. I know everyone hates Michigan, but Michigan, like from that Midwest feel to the climate to everything, it just felt like you're like in like kind of Ohio North. So, and plus it was close to Columbus, which was great. So I mean, by far. And they all had different things that were great. Like Chicago, obviously, in the summertime in Chicago, when you're 23-year-old, is incredible. Miami, obviously, when you're in the NFL as a 23-year-old in Miami, is incredible. But if you said, Kirk, what organization did you like love the most? I love Detroit, and Jim Schwartz is the head coach, and he's the DC for the Browns, and one of the classiest, smartest guys I'd ever been around. And honestly, like, I mean, I wish him nothing but success, because he was a guy that he wrote me a really nice message when I tore my hamstring and they had to release me and sign me with an injury settlement. I mean, it was like heartbreaking, because I was balling in camp, and then I tore my hamstring. And so, if you're a late round guy, like, they don't IR you, they just injury settlement you, where they basically pay you to heal, but you're not on you don't take up a roster spot. So, but yeah, I really like Detroit. So that's probably my favorite spot.
Nice.
Was I guess when you go through the NFL, going through camp and everything, what was the travel like? As far as was there some organizations that were completely organized down to the finite details, or there was some organizations that were kind of like a little off kilter, a little unorganized?
Well, I mean, most of it is pretty locked in because they've been doing it for so long. I mean, it's like you've got most of the people grew up in the NFL, so they get the schedules and the travels. I mean, I never felt like anything was really unorganized. I mean, there were some times, like, when like if you talk to Matt McChesney, who was a great brief teammate when I was in Miami with him. I mean, Miami was insane when we were down there, because it was Bill Parcells was the president, and they're doing the change the culture thing, which means that they're gonna every day is gonna be like basic training at practice, and our practices were a million times harder than anywhere else I was in the NFL. But they also they were 1 in 15 the year before, so they're not. That's kind of the thing, is like, if you're going to a team that sucks, like, I mean, the practices aren't going to be chill. They're not going to be fun. And again, I don't care if it's chill or not, but it's like, it gets to a point in the season, man, where late in the year, like when I was with San Francisco late in the year, I mean, it was like practices were pretty easy. I mean, they weren't like, you took care of guys. Like I used to go against Justin Smith, and Justin Smith, when I was playing for San Francisco, was one of the strongest human beings I've ever been around. And like, like when you get to week, 16 in the season, and Justin started 16 games, and he's 30 years old and he's beat up and stuff. Like you don't tee off on a guy like that in practice. You just try to like take care of him, because that's what smart people do. And again, like we had like a good like relationship, because I was just like, I mean, I'm not going to make a name for myself like trying to come off the rock on Justin, late in the season when he's been playing and I'm on practice. I mean, this is my second year actually on practice squad in San Francisco. I was like, you just want to, make sure that you don't hurt Patrick Willis or, some of the guys that we had. Like Urlacher. Urlacher was one of the greatest guys ever, because I played with him in Chicago. Like, when we'd run the show team stuff, like the scout team stuff, because like in the NFL, like if you're a young lineman or a practice squad lineman or whatever. I was a young lineman in Chicago. Like you would always be, you'd take your reps, and then you'd also do the scout team stuff, which is where you run the other team's plays for the first team defense. And like I'd get with Urlacher, and I would ultra chill with dude. Like I mean, I'd have to go up to the second level and block him, and like you just fit up with him, make it look good for the camera. But I was like Brian, I'm not trying to hurt you, dude. I mean, you're making like $12 million a year. It's like, but he was one of the nicest guys, and that's something that's funny is like when you're in the league, like you don't know how guys are going to act, especially towards rookies, especially towards seventh rounders that are fringe guys. Like, and like dude couldn't have been nicer. That's why like there's some guys that and he was going through like a lawsuit where it was like a paternity test suit. I mean, it was a big story in Chicago. The one thing I will say about Chicago is that their media is ruthless. So I mean, that's like going to be interesting to watch Caleb Williams this year out there, because they were shredding. And now, granted, we had Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton as our quarterbacks, but they were shredding our quarterbacks. They were shredding Brian with that paternity suit. I mean, the media was vicious. And again, I don't really care about the media, but it's interesting as you hear from city to city how beat writers can either be basically like at war with teams as opposed to just actively rooting on teams. That changes wildly from city to city. So that's always kind of interesting to see. Because again, there's some cities that they just don't really care, and then there's some cities where it's like life and death. Like Chicago, it's like that. Miami, nobody really cares. San Francisco, nobody really cares. But Chicago and Detroit, it gets nasty. But again, I like that. Like I like the pressure of the media. If you don't play well, it gets really bad in the papers.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, I know Detroit is pretty diehard in their fan base, so I assume the media is pretty ruthless there as well. Obviously, Chicago is well known for it. I know the one in Cleveland's kind of obviously you didn't play for Cleveland, but Cleveland's kind of like I feel like a middle of the road on that. Is like some of their beat reporters are always super negative, like Tony Grossi and stuff like that. But then others I feel like are mouthpieces for the organization. Do you find that like a lot of places where there's certain factions of the beat that are like, some of them are just super negative about the organization, and then the other people are always super positive? Or is it kind of...
I think that's commonplace across most teams. I think that some teams like to find the beat writers that they can control and use to put messages out in the media. Again, like you can think about Ohio State, and I'm sure that there's names that pop into your head about people that Ohio State controls, because again, there's some beat writers that they're not. I mean, they went to journalism school, but they're actually just fans who, they're fans of a team, and they like actively root for the team that they're supposed to be covering, which is kind of a no-no in journalism. But, I think that teams like to figure out who they can control and put narratives out with. And it happens at really every level of sports, across, the NFL and college. Like there's always like some people that are like state media, and they like when they need to go put out a message, they put it out through them, and and you're the fair haired child, but they know that they can be controlled, and that's something that you see that in the big media markets. Like Ohio State football is as big of a media market as any NFL team. just because of the Ohio State is the state, it's the state school for Ohio. I mean, we don't have like in Michigan, they've got Michigan and Michigan State. Like in Ohio, all we got is Ohio State. I mean, we've got a bunch of MAC schools, but they're not on the same level as Ohio State. So Ohio State's basically, from a media perspective, is covered like an NFL team. And yeah, so you're going to see people that people that are negative. I just, in general, I don't think that negativity is great. If you're trying to grow something, I think that like people want like a good message, and people don't want to hear we're gonna suck all the time. And I think that's why when some guys, when their shtick is being negative, excuse me, it gets old. Now, if you're a national guy like Skip Bayless, and Skip Bayless made tens of millions of dollars by being negative, because that's his shtick. His shtick is to just bash on. He picks his targets, LeBron or Baker Mayfield or Johnny Manziel or whoever, and he just like goes to town on them incessantly. And sometimes I think that it's funny, because I think that a lot of those guys have figured out that if they bash Cleveland or Ohio-based teams, or because Colin Cowherd, who I love to death, and he's a big time friend of Buckeye Scoop. That's part of his shtick. Like he knows like the buttons to press in certain areas and certain teams to get ratings. Because again, Colin is wicked smart, so he knows like, hey, if I when LeBron was playing for the Cavs, man, he's like, oh my God, if I just go in on LeBron, then all these Ohio people are going to be listening, and they're going to be lighting up my little phone board, and they're going to be, they can't take their eyes off of it when I'm, or I mean, that's why he'd crack Baker Mayfield so hard, because he played for the Browns. It wasn't because if he played for the Miami Dolphins, nobody would even care about Baker Mayfield. He doesn't really care about him now that he's in Tampa. When he's in Cleveland, man, it was open season on him. So it's always interesting, because if you're hip to the game, and you understand kind of how things go behind the scenes and how the media works, like it's always interesting to kind of crack the code and say, okay, this is that guy for that team, and this is the guy that's this guy, and and then you just kind of go from there. But it is always interesting to see that there are, and again, I don't think it's just in sports media. I think it's across the board in media. It's like there's organizations that just openly root for the subject they're supposed to be covering. And it really, I think it hurts the folks, because they don't get accurate reporting, because there's inherent bias by certain people covering things. And in an election year, I mean, you guys can imagine what I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I've noticed that across all media, like you said. So,
in Kirk, your time in Detroit, Calvin Johnson was there. What was it like seeing that guy in practice every day?
I mean, it's hard not to get too gaudy, but I mean, I think he might be the best football player that's ever lived. I mean, that guy, 6'5", 230, ran a 4.3. I've never seen a guy practice harder. I mean, he would dive. I mean, he would lay out for balls in OTAs, and we were there. Like Stafford was there. He got there in 2009. So, 2009, 2008, when I was a rookie, I didn't play for the Lions. I got claimed on waivers in the offseason by the Lions. They took Stafford number 1 overall. Stafford got a $60 million signing bonus, and we get out to practice and stuff. And I mean, there was a time Matt Stafford has probably one of the top 5 arms in the history of the NFL. I mean, he has got a cannon, but his accuracy is absolutely insane. I mean, from the first 5 minutes of practicing with him, I was like, because you see him and he's like, he's kind of fat and doughy, and hair's weird, but like he get on that field, man, you watch him throw, and you're like, this guy is like, I mean, he got the best arm. He's the best arm I've ever seen. It's like him, Rodgers. There's certain guys that they have this accuracy thing where they're just nails. And I remember I was standing in practice, and he's going obviously with the 1s, and I was going with the 2s. And like, dude, he throws a rocket, like a missile, like a big moon ball, and it had to have gone 75 yards downfield. And like, I was like, there's no way Calvin's getting to that. And Calvin turns the jets on, and he dives for it. And this is in the OTAs. And Calvin's he'd make $100 million. And like, he dives for a ball in OTAs with no pads on and snags it. And I was like, again, I know that Jerry Rice is the GOAT, because whatever, and Chris Carter is number 2, but like, to me, I think Calvin Johnson's the greatest receiver who's ever lived, because if Calvin Johnson, I always tell people, I'm like, look, if Jerry Rice had to play in Detroit with John Kitna and Rod Marinelli and Dan Orlovsky, he's not the GOAT. If you put Calvin with Bill Walsh, George Seifert, and then you got Steve Young, Montana, that crew, Bill Walsh, like designing your offense. Like, I mean, there's just no way that Calvin doesn't have the numbers. I mean, he's got the all-time one season deal, the 1900 mark, but I don't know. Calvin Johnson's the best football player I've ever seen. And I don't know, again, like I know Jerry Rice is the GOAT, and people say, Kirk, you're an idiot for saying that Jerry Rice isn't the GOAT. Because the thing about Jerry Rice is he did do it he played till he's like 43 years old. So I mean, his numbers are so far out there that they're never going to get touched. But he also had, I always tell people it's about your infrastructure, man. When you get to play with, 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, not 1, 2, for 75% of your career. And then he goes to Oakland. He's got Rich Gannon and John Gruden. So he was always around great offensive minds and Pro Bowl level quarterbacks, where it's like Calvin, like until he got Matt, I mean, it was, the first, few years, first 3-4 years, man, it was like, it was death's door, Rod Marinelli and whatever. And he never had that true offensive guru around him. But plus, like, in Detroit, you don't get the talent that you can get in San Francisco, because not as many people want to live in Detroit unless they get drafted there. But Calvin was incredible, and again, he what a great guy, classy guy. It's interesting because he has a business style with Rob Sims. They do the medical marijuana thing, and like Robbie's one of my best friends and was one of my favorite teammates. He was the left guard, played at Ohio State from 02 to 05. Started at left tackle versus the Miami Hurricanes, and him and Calvin are literally business partners, along with Gosper Shurlis, who I played with, and just great people. And like I said, Calvin was incredible.
That's awesome. You brought up one thing there. Obviously, I agree with you. I think Calvin Johnson, at least physically and just how he was as a player, is arguably one of the best wide receivers of all time. But you brought up Matt Stafford, which I've always thought Matt Stafford was a kind of, I hesitate to say underrated because he's been so highly talked about his whole career, but I feel like he doesn't get the respect he deserves for what he did in Detroit. But there was a former Ohio State quarterback who had some comments about Matt Stafford recently, and CJ Stroud saying if you gave Matt Stafford Aaron Rodgers' situation, he would have at least 3 rings or something like that. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, again, you always look at who are the coaches that he had. He had Jim Schwartz, who I think is fantastic, but Jim Schwartz is a defensive coach. And then they had Caldwell, who was a really good offensive coach. Excuse me. But I think that these guys are, they're in football, you're so tied to your infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean your coaching staff and your the talent that they assemble around you. Matt, I mean, when Matt got drafted, he literally got drafted in an organization that went 0-16. I mean, they were the first winless team in NFL history. So, like, he got fed to the wolves right away. He had to start and save an 0-16 franchise. So he got the crap beat out of him. And everyone remembers the Browns game where he got the shoulder ripped out of his socket, and then he threw a touchdown, and he got hit by Sean Rogers at the end of the game, and he couldn't even lift his arm and celebrate with the team. So that's what he dealt with. Where Aaron Rodgers, and again, I think Aaron Rodgers is a top 5 quarterback. I think Aaron Rodgers might be the best quarterback that's ever lived. I know Brady's got all the rings and everything because he had Belichick, but I mean Aaron Rodgers for what he did was crazy. And I always laugh because I always felt like the Packers like actively worked against him because they never drafted receivers. Like, I mean, they had a chance to take T. Higgins and they took Jordan Love. And again, Jordan Love's going to be a Pro Bowler. He's going to be a really good player. But like, if Rodgers had T. Higgins, like the last couple of years he was there, it would have been a wrap. But again, they knew what they were doing because they were succession planning and whatever. But I think Matt, when he went to LA, LA paid through the nose to get him with Goff and a couple first rounders. But all of a sudden he gets Cooper Kupp. He gets a legit offensive mind in Sean McVay, and he flourished. And again, I think that if you're, I always look at these situations with these quarterbacks and where do they get drafted to? Because I don't think that every quarterback that's a bust is truly a bust, because I think sometimes they get taken to situations where they don't have a chance to be successful at all, and that's like Bryce Young. Bryce Young last year, with the interior line that the Carolina Panthers had, that he had no chance. He got absolutely, he got demolished, and he's a little guy. He's gonna get hurt. He did get hurt. Where CJ didn't go to some plum situation, but he had Laramie Tunsil, who's the top two left tackle in the league with Trent Williams. Titus Howard was a first round pick that they play inside. They actually have a really talented offensive line, like really talented. And now CJ did go. They're still the second worst team in the league, so they weren't. It wasn't all great, but they signed Dalton Schultz, so they get a Pro Bowl tight end. Nico Collins developed big time with CJ. Tank Dell had a nice rookie year, and then they go get Steph Diggs. So it's like CJ had a much better shot to succeed than Bryce Young because of the protection that he had in front of him. And they played great defense. So, CJ obviously was as good of a rookie as there's ever been last year. But I think that some of these guys, like Tim Couch, Bruce Arians, the real famous quote, he talked about how he said Tim Couch wasn't a bust. And most Cleveland Browns fans said, yes, he was. But the 99 Browns, I went to every game. I had season tickets for the Browns until I went to Ohio State. So I went to all the games in 99, 2000, and 2001. And 02. So I went to every single home game. And the 99 Browns was the worst team. Somehow they actually won 2 games, but they were as bad as any team ever in terms of protecting the quarterback. So, Tim got killed. And, I always laughed because when Peyton Manning got drafted to the Colts, which was literally in 98, it was the year prior to Tim Couch, they had a first round left tackle in Tarek Glenn. They had Marvin Harrison on the roster. They had Marshall Faulk on the roster. So they had some tools for him to work and actually be successful. Where, Tim Couch shows up, man, he's throwing it to Kevin Johnson and handing the ball to Eric Rett, and the offensive line is just, impossibly bad. So, again, is Tim a bust? Well, I don't know. I think if you switch their spots and you put Peyton Manning with the Browns in 99, he's not Peyton Manning because he gets pulverized. These young quarterbacks, man, when they get out there and they get hit that much, man, it's hard for the longevity of your career when you get sacked 70 times as a rookie, and then also the next year you get sacked 65 times. And, by the time you get to year 3, year 4, you could really be up the creek in terms of your ability to play because you've been hurt so much. Again, when you're getting hit, you're getting hit by defensive ends, defensive tackles. And, it only takes one of those to rip your shoulder out. Like with Stafford, when Sean Rogers hit him, and Sean Rogers weighed 380 pounds, was 6'6", that ain't gonna, that's what the hit is. It's not like you're getting hit by a little cornerback. You're getting hit by big dudes. So it can wear you down pretty quick.
Well, yeah, I think that, and then on top of that, when you start feeling pressure and getting pressured so much like that, at least I think young quarterbacks, they start seeing ghosts, right? Where even if the pressure's not there, it's in their head. Yep. So it completely can mess you up. And I think that happened a lot to Baker Mayfield and Brady Quinn, and even more Cleveland quarterbacks, because Cleveland's been a bit of a shit show for a long time in that regard.
Yeah, I honestly, it happened to Kyle McCord last year. There were times where he saw ghosts, and I didn't think our protection was bad last year, but there are some games where he just he just shriveled up and died in the pocket, and it really really hurt us.
Absolutely.
And you bring up infrastructure, Kirk. You brought up the Packers, which I know if Nevada's listening to this, I would like to get his response on it. They go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love possibly going to be a Pro Bowl, a top built quarterback in the league, and and they go from Holmgren to McCarthy. The Packers, for as much credit as they get that they've figured it out, but they never really won anything significant. You have 25 years of Favre and Rodgers. Would you consider that era a failure in Green Bay?
I don't know if it can be a failure when they've won 2 Super Bowls. I know that seems like a small number because again, the hard part is when everyone compares themselves to the Patriots who've won multiple. You've got these teams that have stacked these dynasties up, like the Chiefs have got 3, and the Patriots had 7, and Denver's got a couple. It's hard to it's hard for me to say failure when they've won 2 Super Bowls. When I've grown up a Browns fan, they've never won a Super Bowl in 60 years of having the Super Bowl. So and I know they won the NFL championship in '64, but they don't have the big ring. And again, it sucks. And I don't even know what happened to the state of Ohio if they won the Super Bowl. I think the entire state would burn down, or people. I can't imagine how much alcohol would be sold in the city of Cleveland if they ever actually won a Super Bowl. Because that'd be insanity. But I do think it is a failure because I thought they failed Aaron Rodgers because they didn't support him. They didn't go all in for him. Because like if I was the general manager and I had Aaron Rodgers and he was in his late 20s, 30s. I'm just saying, screw it and going all in. And I'm doing the same thing the Rams did, where they dealt all their first round picks and they kind of pushed it all under the table to get that as much talent around a superstar quarterback as get. Because to me, the perfect model is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like they signed Tom Brady and they got Mike Evans. They go out and get Antonio Brown before he went nuts. They go out and get Leonard Fournette. They go sign Gronkowski off the beach. They went all in. I mean, they signed Ndamukong Suh. I mean, they literally just, and again, they were in salary cap heck for a minute. Then they got out of it and they got Baker there. But like I thought that it was always strange to me how the Green Bay Packers and the New England Patriots really worked hard to like not support their quarterbacks. Like you look at who Tom Brady was thrown to at the end of his career. Is like, I mean, I'd want to leave too. I mean, Jacoby Myers, again, nice player. They were going to trade Gronkowski to Detroit, which is insane because so that's why he retired, so that they couldn't trade him. I mean, so they're literally trading his best weapons. They never found him a big receiver. And again, I think that's just a philosophical thing with certain teams. And you only have so much money to spend in free agency, and then you only have so much money that your owner will let you spend. So they didn't want to spend it on offensive skill guys. Like, I mean, he never had like a superstar running back, for the latter part of his career. When they had like, Corey Dillon and some of those guys, it was different. But, at the end of his career, man, I mean, I was like, how could they just, they don't re-up Wes Welker. They don't re-up all of the guys that were like his key guys. And, they made him turn Julian Edelman into a Pro Bowler, who's a 7th round pick. And, so I think that, if I was Rodgers, and again with Rodgers, like they traded Devontae Adams, who was the best receiver in the NFL at the time. I don't know, like it's just they did interesting things, man. Because if I got Aaron, man, I'm not getting rid of Devontae Adams because that was like magical. I mean, if anything, if you take T Higgins and have Devontae Adams with Rodgers, like I don't know how you can defend that. I really don't. But they went for Jordan Love, and again, that's why. Their succession planning has been the best in the history of the NFL, going from Favre to Rodgers to Love, and they let their quarterback sit for a year, which again I think is smart in the NFL because the NFL is a different animal, and it's especially a different animal for quarterbacks. Guys, it helps if they can learn, but a lot of these organizations they don't have time for it. Like CJ Stroud, he didn't have. I mean, he was a starter as soon as he got there. Same with Bryce Young because these general managers they know that they're on the hot seat. And if you're starting Davis Mills over CJ Stroud, like the next GM is going to get to deserve the fruits of you taking that kid. So that's why you see these GMs spend picks in their drafts where they traded up to take Will Anderson and they traded 2 number 1 picks to move up and get a Pro Bowl defensive end, which is smart. But they also know that if it doesn't work out that year, they're going to get fired anyway. So the next GM can say, "Man, I don't have a 1st round pick this year because that guy traded him." So I don't know. Like these guys like to go for broke, but it works. Like I said, like with the Packers, I would have done more to surround Rodgers with a big time second receiver or a big time tight end, and that's kind of what the Jets are doing. I mean, they traded for Mike Williams. Obviously, they already had Garrett Wilson. They spent and got Tyron Smith at left tackle. Like the Jets are going for broke because they know that Aaron's he's 41 years old or 42 years old or whatever it is. So they ain't got long with them. So they better try to do the best they can do.
Yeah, strike when the iron's hot, right? And
you have to.
I found it very interesting, circling back to Aaron's career in Green Bay. I think there was a stat out there that they didn't draft an offensive player in the 1st round, basically his entire career until they drafted Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was just wild. Like you have a multiple time MVP quarterback who is carrying your franchise. You got lucky or you hit on Devontae Adams. You need to surround him with more talent than that. You hit on Aaron Jones, who was a 3rd round pick or whatever. I mean, they had pieces there, and then they just didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, totally agree.
And Nick Sirianni down there in Houston, he got super aggressive going after Will Anderson and get CJ Stroud and also fleecing the Browns on the Deshaun Watson trade. So I think Houston is doing really well. But one of the other another question I had for you, Kirk, was like in your time in Chicago when you had guys like Owen Krutz and Matt Forte and Robbie Gold, just consummate professionals at the craft. Was it really special getting to watch guys like that work day in, day out?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, Olin Krutz is the best professional I've ever been around in terms of really being a pro. He's easily the best leader I ever saw in the NFL. Really in any profession. I mean, he was a guy that he ran the show, ultimate competitor, ultimate warrior, ultimate guy that just there's like a code that you live by, and the Bears had a lot of interesting stuff with the O-line where it was like, there are all these little things that I was finding out kind of not the hard way, but like, when you're an offensive line with the Bears, like you travel together. So like when you're traveling to a road game, like we all walk out together. We all walk out to the bus together. We all sit on the plane together. We all go out to eat. I mean, everybody does everything together, which again, that was the only place in the NFL that was like that. So it was like this herd mentality. Like in Chicago, like if there was a fight and you weren't running into the fight on the film, then you got like a little O-line room fine for that, which I thought was great. So like if someone's getting in a fight, if Carter is getting in a fight or I'm just getting in a fight, and like the other two of us aren't running into the fight on film, that was a fine. Every O-line room has like a kind of kangaroo court where there's fines for all kinds of stupid stuff, and they're $10 or $50 or $100. It's not like it's $50,000, but if you do something stupid or say something stupid, or like one that was funny is like if you clapped after you lost a rep, like if you lost a rep on a pass rush, you're like, oh man, like gosh, or you like, I mean, that was a fine on film. I mean, so there's all these little funny things you get fined for. But Olin was great. It's funny, I actually named my kid, my second kid's named Kane Olin, and it's after Olin Krutz because I call him KO, like knockout. But I told Olin, I was like, hey, I love your middle name or your name, so I'm gonna name my kid's middle name is gonna be Olin. And he's like a little monster, like Olin Krutz was. But it was funny because he was so good to me, and he didn't have to be as a 7th round, late round guy. But he just he liked my approach because I didn't talk. Because a big thing with rookies, especially like when you're in a place like Chicago where you got guys like Olin Krutz, like is that rookies don't talk. And he was the ultimate pro when something would get screwed up, even if it wasn't his fault. Like if there's like a quarterback center exchange where Olin, puts the ball right on the quarterback's top hand and he's under center. Like Olin always took the blame. He always said it was his fault. If there was some screw up on a double team block, combination block, he always would take the blame, even if it clearly wasn't his fault. And that was like something that kind of like, it's a good life lesson that, hey, you can be the guy that says it's me, it's on me, I got to get better, as opposed to pointing at people and saying, he screwed up or the quarterback didn't, whatever. And that was like kind of like a thing is like, even if it's not truly your fault, you just absorb it and take the blame because you're like the battleship that can absorb it. And he just was such an incredible leader, and he was such a great guy to learn from. Because like a lot of stuff he did, like I carry it with me like in life, and I was only with him for a short time, but he just the way he carried himself was incredible. And I mean, he rolled that locker room with an iron fist, and it was great. Like I said, I love the guy, and I think that he should be in the Hall of Fame, and it's a crime against humanity that he's not in the NFL Hall of Fame yet.
Right. Owen's an all-time great.
I completely agree.
And when you go into a team like Chicago that year, the team was 7-9, and that was the quarterback kind of controversy with Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton. How big of a strain is that on the locker room? Because you were at Ohio State, was that between Troy Smith and Todd Beckman?
Justin Zwick.
Justin Zwick.
Yeah. I think that there's some strain. Kyle ended up winning the gig. It was funny because when I was in like OTAs and camp and stuff, like they both were with both groups, so they'd go with the ones and twos. So I had both quarterbacks. Like, I actually really liked Rex Grossman. Rex Grossman was just hated by the fan base and hated by the Chicago media because he was a first round pick, and obviously it didn't really pan out the way that they'd hoped. But he was a great guy, and so was KO. Kyle Orton was a great dude. He's a Purdue guy, obviously. But those guys were, it's tough in Chicago. I mean, everybody has opinions, and it's hard when you don't have a clear cut guy. And I didn't think there was a ton of separation in camp, but they obviously went with Kyle Orton. Kyle Orton ended up having a great career, in Chicago and Denver and wherever else he was. But he, it's tough when you don't have a separation. But I didn't feel like there was as big of a schism between the two in the locker room, because there's sometimes when there's a quarterback controversy, there's there's real lines in the sand being drawn in the locker room. Like with Troy and Justin, it was really clear. I mean, there was like half the team wanted Troy and half the team wanted Justin. But again, that's that got decided. Gets decided on the field, and it's always good when you see like a pretty healthy separation after they both get to start and play, and you're like, okay, this guy's clearly the better player, and let's go with him going forward.
And I think that's always something that I find fascinating when it comes to the NFL. Whenever you have a position battle or a quarterback battle, it's such in the media so much. And one of the last stops in your NFL career was going out to Denver. How was that experience?
It was interesting. It was Josh McDaniels' first year, and obviously he got busted for Spygate. It's funny. Brandon Marshall did a funny podcast. I think it was Brandon Marshall. He was there the year before, and they got rid of. He got rid of Brandon Marshall, Jay Cutler. He got rid of like everybody, which was wild. And he drafted Tebow. So I was there for Tebow's rookie year, basically, and it was crazy. It was wild because the Tebow mania thing. He was our third string quarterback, and he's running all over the place and making plays. And the training camp was fun because he when he was running around and throwing a ball, like a lot of these throws would never get off in a real game because they couldn't sack him because he literally had a black jersey. So he'd keep going and then he'd throw it 60 yards and throw a touchdown. I was like, but he probably would have gotten sacked if it was a real game. But it just was. The Tebow mania thing was very real in Denver because he was a first round pick and McDaniels picked him and picked Demaryius Thomas. Like, God rest his soul. Demaryius Thomas is one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life, and just a great dude. Obviously, he had a great NFL career. It's unbelievable that he's gone, that he passed away. Mm-hmm. But like there were some really good players out there. I was out there with Elvis Dumervil, Brian Dawkins. Brian Dawkins, obviously a Hall of Famer. Champ Bailey, obviously a Hall of Famer. So yeah, it was weird. Like when I made my rounds, like sometimes I laugh. I was like, if I ever be like an all like Kirk team of players that I played with in the NFL, like it'd be like a really good team. And it's like you got B Doc and Champ Bailey and some of the guys that I had, the DBs that I played with. It was crazy. Patrick Willis, Urlacher, Lance Briggs, like it's Joey Porter. They're like literal Hall of Famers that could stack my defense and the offense. So it's always kind of funny to kind of think about that.
Yeah, that is interesting. You did play. You already talked about Stafford, Calvin Johnson, like you got quite a list of accomplished players there that you were around.
Ocho Cinco. Don't
there you go. Yeah, definitely not. But so circling back to the Tebow thing, because obviously I was around Tebow a little bit when my brother was at Florida, and I got to see him interact and lead that locker room and lead that team. How was Tebow received in the locker room? Because I always wondered, he was always a very big, rah-rah guy and like very outspoken or loud in the locker room in Florida. And I just wondered how that would translate to the NFL. And obviously his career didn't pan out to be anything more than the one moment where he beat the Steelers in the playoffs. But how was he received in the locker room and how kind of was that dynamic?
Well, I thought he was good. When you're a rookie in the league, it's just, you try to do everything he can to make the team and work hard and fit in. And I mean, he did that. I mean, we ran sprints after every practice, and he would always be a mile ahead of everybody. You know, the skill guys would run, and the big dudes would run, and he'd always be way up there ahead of everybody. And but I thought he was he was a really good, he was a good dude. I mean, I had lunch with him a bunch of times. When you're in the in the lunchroom, like, you sit, you eat your food, and then during 2 days we'd have like a 2.5 or 3 hour break, and the hotel that we stayed in was like 2 minutes up the road. So you'd eat lunch, get in your car, and then drive to the hotel and take a nap for 2 hours if you could get it. But I thought Tebow did a good job. I mean, he's a kid that I can't say a bad word about him. Worked really hard. I mean, obviously didn't have huge arm talent, and that's what killed him in the league. But he was a force. I just think that there's some people that they peak in college, and then there's some people that are more bred for the NFL. And I always say Tebow, he was like him and Tyler Hansbrough were two of the greatest collegiate athletes of all time, but they didn't really do much when they got to the professional level, just because they were built for the college game. And once you get to a certain level, if the style of play changes, because obviously, like, the style of play in college is wildly different from the National Football League, because you run the quarterback a lot in college if you want to be successful. Where in the National Football League, like, you don't run your quarterback very much. I mean, you can if he's like Cam Newton and he's 250 pounds, but you get a lot of, you don't run CJ or Bryce Young or Tebow. It's just not something that NFL teams do, because if you get your starting quarterback hurt, running the read option in the NFL, like, it's going to be, you're going to have a long talk with that owner, man. I mean, these coaches are trying not to get fired, and if you get their first round pick quarterback hurt because you're running him and he gets smoked by a linebacker on a read option, like, that ain't going to be good. But like I said, I thought, I honestly thought he would have a better career than he did. Because he was so good at Florida. And even if you look at his throwing numbers in Florida, they were substantial. I mean, he was probably the greatest quarterback in college football history. So I was a little surprised that he didn't make it. But again, when they started playing him at the end of his rookie year, like, I mean, they couldn't throw the ball, but he could run all over the place and get rushing touchdowns. So he was productive. But yeah, I was a little surprised he didn't have a little bit better career. But that throwing motion, it's tough in the NFL, man, because you get to the NFL. The one thing I talk about all the time, and this is something like with Kyle McCord, or if he's going to make it, he's going to get way better at it. It's like, great NFL quarterbacks that make it in the league, they have to be able to throw from a bad pocket, because you're not going to get that Ohio State versus Akron pocket where you've got 7 seconds to throw and the edges are set by the offensive tackles, and the pocket is good and firm across the front by your two guards instead of, like, in the league, the pass rushers are too good. So you're going to have to make off balance throws, and you're going to have to make throws with guys kind of hanging on you and reaching for you. And because that's what it is. Like, you watch, like, some of the clips of Phillip Rivers and Roethlisberger and Aaron Rodgers and those guys. Like, I mean, they did it when the pockets were bad. And that's something that I think that, when you see guys struggle at Ohio State because they have a little bit of pressure, then they have no shot in the league. Because you get to the league, man, the pass rushes are incredible, and the O-lines aren't as deep, because you might have a $30 million left tackle, but behind him is a practice squatter or a 7th rounder or whatever. And if Trent Williams gets hurt and misses a week, you've got a practice squatter starting at left tackle, and he's going against Myles Garrett or whatever. And it's something where that's the most important thing to me for a quarterback, other than arm talent, is how does he fare in a bad pocket? Because in the league, you're gonna have a lot of bad pockets.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're at Ohio State, you play 1 or 2 defenses a year that are NFL level, maybe not even quite. But the thing with the NFL is every single week you're going up against Georgia on defense, right, or something like that. So it's just week in and week out.
Yep.
And I've talked to Matt McChesney about that, because he was in Denver too with Josh McDaniels during that the whole thing that happened with him. And I think it's wild that you'll get some of these guys that come into NFL teams and they'll just completely trade Brandon Marshall, trade a Jay Cutler, and they think they're the Broncos started out. I mean, Josh McDaniels, that year looked like the smartest guy in the room because they started out like 6-0, I believe, and they beat New England that year. And then it was just built on a house of sand. And then also your time in Chicago, Kirk, what was it like? Devin Hester, was that dude that fast?
Yeah, I mean, Hest obviously is Hall of Fame kick returner. Yeah, he was fast. I mean, I don't know how often you saw it in practice because in punt period, like he's back there just catching it and don't see. But he was he was a difference maker. I mean, as a mostly special teamer and kind of gadget guy to make the Hall of Fame is absolutely incredible. But yeah, he was that guy. But I think that teams. When I was there, I don't think he had a single return for a touchdown because I think teams really adjusted to him. His first 2 years in the league when I was still in college, like he was, he ran the kickback in the Super Bowl and, but eventually, like, if you're a special teams coordinator, like you have to be a total moron to kick to a guy who's that good at running it back. So he didn't really get a lot of touches. Like he didn't get a lot of opportunities after the first years because you become a marked man. When you're Devin Hester, if they kick it to you and he runs one back and it's the third year that he's been doing it, like they're going to fire the special teams coordinator or they're going to say, why are we kicking to that guy? Why don't we punt it out of bounds? Why don't we sky kick it? Why don't we do something where we actually have a chance? Because, there was a point where he was the biggest offensive weapon on the team and he's a punt returner because the offense wasn't great. They're just kind of scraping by and, it was kind of like Ted Ginn in 2004, where he ran one back versus Wisconsin, he ran one back versus Michigan. Like we weren't great on offense, so Ted was our spark a lot when it came to the quick strike, a punt return or a long touchdown reception. But Hess was amazing. But I think the team's kind of wised up to giving him the ball because like being a punt returner is awesome until they figure out that you're really good at it, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of ways where you just kick it out of bounds, so you don't ever get an opportunity, and it kind of kills you because it's like it'd be like if an NBA team figured out, oh, Steph Curry's out there and he's really good at shooting threes. We can do this where he's not allowed to shoot threes anymore. You just throw the ball out of bounds or whatever, and he can't. So there's ways to eliminate a guy like Hester, and that happened. In year 3, I mean, teams just weren't giving him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's wild to me. Just you go back and you watch those highlights and how good a guy like Devin Hester was. And this is another story that Chesney had told on his podcast when you guys were in Miami. You guys went into that Ravens playoff game, and he said that Ray Lewis knew everything. Like, just from watching film, it'd be like you guys would run right, and he would just call it out and be like, a trap here. Mm-hmm. Playing against a guy, on the defensive side of that caliber as Ray Lewis is got to be an interesting time just watching it play out in real time.
Well, yeah, I mean, because at some point you're pleading with the guys to break tendencies because if they get your tendencies that cold, then that's eventually it's on the offensive coordinator. It's on the play caller. It's on that was Dan Henning at the time. You gotta change it up, man. You can't just keep calling it because you can tell if teams know your keys, and again that's on self scout and that's on just not being scrambled up enough on your play calling. Because if guys are calling stuff out, it's not a good day. So really, that's on the OC. Again, guys in the NFL study a lot of tape. There's a pretty deep bench of guys in the organization that study tendencies, and you get little tip sheets and stuff. But guys like Ray Lewis and Tom Brady and Ed Reed and those types of guys, I mean, they watch 20 hours of film a week, 25 hours of film a week to get ready for an opponent. So by the time it's game day, it's like studying for a test over and over and over again, and then they hand you the test and you just fill in the bubbles because you remember all the answers. That's what it feels like. And guys like Ray Lewis, I mean, that's why probably the best linebacker that's ever lived, maybe the best defensive player that ever lived. Because when you're a linebacker, studying tape and reading keys is everything. And he was as good as he's ever been at it.
And also your time in Miami, I don't know if I'm right, but was that the year they broke out the Wildcat when you were down there?
Yeah, they did it after we lost to Arizona. It was actually my first week there. we lose to Arizona like 38-7, or I mean, it was a massacre. And it was like, Arizona to Miami is it's like a 6-hour flight. It took forever to get home. But on the flight home, they talked about we're going to do this wildcat thing where, the tackle goes unbalanced, which means he plays tight end. The tight end comes back to the short side and plays like left tackle. And then, we had Ricky Williams and Ronnie Brown. And, the guy that, oh my God, I'm blanking right now on the offensive coordinator that he was in Arkansas with Houston Nutt. I want to say it's not David Shaw, it's David Lee. So David, God, was that his name? David Lee from Arkansas. I gotta look this up because it's gonna drive me nuts if we don't have it. Yeah, it was David Lee. So David Lee was he was the coordinator at Arkansas when they had McFadden and Felix Jones and Peyton Hillis. And he pitched it to Tony Sperano, and the offense was atrocious, and the running game was even worse. So he's like, hey, we could do this. It's gonna be gimmicky, and people are gonna say dumb stuff, but you motion it. It's basically like it's like a way to run. It's single wing football. It's read option, and and we do it with Ricky. When you have Ricky and Ronnie, you have 2 first-round running backs. Like, might as well give it a shot, and they did it. And I mean, when they sprung it on New England, I mean they'd never seen it before, so they actually went up and beat the Patriots, and it was like stunning. I mean, going up to New England and beating the Patriots was awesome. So yeah, it was one of those wild, weird times where I remember when I was looking at the install sheet and I was like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna run single wing football. That's where we're at now with our offense, but it worked. It was incredible.
Yeah, definitely. I remember that game against New England and that Wildcat. I mean, you get moments like that where people do things and it's like, how did they think of that? But then when you break it down like that, like you have Ricky Williams and Ronnie, like, why not?
Yeah, I mean, they're literally your 2 best players on offense. And in traditional football, like, you don't have 2 running backs on the field, but they figured out a way to use them both at the same time, and plus add the element of the read option, which again, the read option was not a big thing back in 2008. It obviously it grew into being the thing in college football. But in the NFL, like, nobody had ever ran that, so it was wild.
Yeah, I know. I've heard lots of stories about being a rookie in NFL rooms. Obviously, being a late round pick, it might be a little different than if you were a first round pick and things like that. But you go through, I'm sure, certain types of hazing or rookie initiations and things like that. Was there anything that you witnessed or that you had to do when you first got into the league?
I mean, in Chicago, you got to do in training camp, you got to do the classic, go up to the front of the room, sing a song, a cappella, and say your signing bonus. And, I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, it's not going to sound good, but I did it. And I sang A Country Boy Can Survive by Hank Williams Jr.
Okay.
It sounded terrible, and I'm not a singer, but, it's better just to do it, knock it out. Like, nobody's expecting like some sort of a, you're not everyone can be Agent Hutchinson and hit the Billie Jean and that kind of thing. So, but I did it. Again, I was whatever like they asked me to do, I just did because it's just easier that way. I mean, there was never anything bad. Like there was never any run through the hallways and get hit by pillowcases with soap in them and like some of the crazy stuff that happened in the old days. Like I mean, that wasn't about that. But if they say, hey, the veterans all want Gatorade at their seats, like that was the thing with the Bears. They all had different flavors of Gatorade they liked and. I'll go grab the Gatorades and put them at your chair. Like that's fine. I don't care. Like I'm good. I'm good with it, guys. Like that's not some big ass cake. Can you bring 10 Gatorades and get the berry black Arctic freeze or whatever? And like, sure, of course. But in Miami, like we went out to some nice dinners and we played credit card roulette, which was not fun. I mean, I honestly didn't even want to go to the dinners because like we went to Hard Rock in Miami and it was like $6,000 for dinner. So I'm just sitting there. I'm just like, and the funniest thing is that the guy that lost was Jake Long, who made $60 million that year. So it's like, him paying a $6,000 tab is like, paying 5 cents compared to guys that, made, league minimum. And league minimum is still great, but $6,000, that's a ton of money for dinner, especially like in 08. But like I wasn't really into the credit card roulette scene, but that was something that was, I think that those guys like to do.
I gotcha. Nice. Well, looking back on your time in the NFL, and you were in there for a couple years, what are there, you don't have to give a like 5 or whatever, but like, what are some of your best memories or best stories from that time of your life?
No, I mean, just being transient. I mean, I was on 5 teams my rookie year, which I never planned on. When you dream of
Mm-hmm.
being in the league, you don't plan on getting cut and
Mm-hmm.
hey, we're gonna bring you back to practice squad on Monday. Then you get claimed on waivers. So when you're a rookie and you're a young guy in the league and you get cut, you're exposed to the waivers. And the waivers in the NFL works the same way it does in your fantasy football league, where the team with the worst record has a chance to claim you. So like I went from Chicago, which I absolutely loved. They tried to sneak me through on waivers after Tuesday at 4, which meant that they were going to pay me that week. And they said, take the week off, come back Monday, we'll be ready to go. And I thought I had the week off. They also get claimed by the Miami Dolphins, and I have to fly to Miami, in the middle of the night and practice the next day. And I mean, it was atrocious. And then I Miami, our fullback breaks his ankle in practice, and they got a signing off the street. They tried to cut me on a Saturday to sneak me through waivers. I literally re-signed my contract, and it was going to be right back on the roster. And talked to Bill Parcells, talked to Sperano. They were just like, "Hey, we love you here. You're doing great. We think you got a great future. We'll even let you sign your contract to come right back on the roster on Monday. Take the weekend off. You're already paid for the week. It's all good." Basically, I was going to be off the team for one day on Sunday so they could sign a fullback. And I got claimed by the 49ers. So I had to fly. I had to go home, fly to New Jersey, meet the team with the Giants, go into a meeting where I didn't know anybody except for Kentwan Balmer and Vernon Davis. I knew Kentwan Balmer from the Senior Bowl, and I knew Vernon Davis because we both had Under Armour contracts. So my Under Armour rep introduced me to Vernon. He was cool, but I go out there. They lose like 45-7. It was just a massacre at the Meadow, or at the whatever, the Meadowlands or whatever it was. And we get home. I don't even know like where I'm staying at. They put you in a hotel for the first week until you find a place to stay. And like the next day, we watch the film. We get this big speech from Mike Nolan. We're gonna put the pads on this week. We're gonna get after it. We're gonna we're gonna get physical, whatever. And then like I go to Barnes and Noble to read books because I have nothing else to do. I've got a rental car. I've got so I find a Chipotle, eat lunch or dinner or whatever. And then I go to Barnes and Noble to read magazines because I didn't have an Xbox. I was living in a hotel. I just wanted to be out in humanity. And then Mike Dolan gets fired, like literally, like on my iPhone, which was brand new at the time. So then you got Singletary coming as the interim coach, and I was there for like 8 weeks. Isaac Bruce got hurt. They had to sign a guy for Monday Night Football to play. They cut me. I actually go back to the Miami Dolphins. I'm there for about 3 weeks, and I'm on their practice squad, but they're paying me full salary. Which again, once you're through 6 weeks in the league and you get your vested status, then it doesn't really matter if you're practice squad or not. It depends on if they want to pay you your full salary and be on practice squad, it doesn't even matter at that point. But then the Cincinnati Bengals called and they said, "Hey, we want you on active, and we've got, we're down to like 7 linemen. So there's a good shot you could get in for the last 5 weeks of the season." I was like, "Let's ride." Because the Dolphins, when you're on practice squad, you don't have a chance to get into the game unless they elevate you. But the Bengals are like, "You get in this year." So I go to Cincinnati. And I'm there for 2 weeks, and the second week I'm there, I break my ankle in practice. So it was like it was an interesting NFL experience. But again, I loved it because I made active roster money for the whole year. I was all over the place, but again, I don't. There's a billion people that would kill to be in my shoes.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't cry for me, Argentina. When it was it was 08, it was the recession. People were hurting, and I had an incredible year financially. So like I said, I loved it. It was great. But it was a good time.
And we got a comment from one of our listeners, Richie. I don't know if you
I
can see
appreciate
that.
Yeah, the Battle 13th Street. So he must be a Central Catholic guy. Appreciate you, Richie. Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
Battle 13th Street is Central Catholic versus Perry, the two high schools. We're literally on the same street.
Oh, really?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, outside of that, Carter, I don't have anything else.
No, I think we covered everything I wanted to touch on, at least.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Kirk. Really appreciate it. I love talking to you, man.
All right, thank you guys.
Yep, appreciate you, Kirk. And that is going to be a wrap on the Andre Duke Show. Go follow Kirk on Buckeye Scoop, on Spotify, Squeaker, and all the other platforms. And Carter, I believe this is it.
Yeah, sounds good, man. I will talk to you guys later.
Later.